All right, this is the Low Sodium Gaming Podcast, otherwise known as LSG. My name's Kris, and this is Rob. Say hi, Rob.
Hey, what's up, guys?
And today we're going to be talking about, is the video game industry woke? So, short answer, spoilers, no. That's my opinion, though.
Yeah,
Rob, how do you think? What do you
all
think
right.
about
So
it?
no. So it's a good that you mention it. It's not that it's the industry is not woke, but I do feel that industries do feel pressured about the local minority, or not the local, but the vocal minority of people that do find offense to some of these video games, where they're they're very much upset of how people are being represented, and they'll scream out, they'll cry out, say like things like, this video game is not doing, not doing right by these other people and such." And then all of a sudden it blows up, and we have we have companies trying to scramble. So I think that's where you see also the, like, video games going to the point of like, listen, like, I understand what you're talking about, so what we're gonna do is like do like a Ubisoft, where I'm going to allow you to pick either a man or a woman, and you decide however you want to play those characters, instead of focusing on one individual person and continuing that story. And it, for it, in order to make everybody happy, it makes sense. But I also think uh, that's where I think stories can be diluted, and
Okay.
we maybe I can go on a tangent here. One of the things that I get upset about is in the Ubisoft games, especially in the Assassin's Creed game, Valhalla and Odyssey. In Valhalla and Odyssey, like the the people that are developing the game are very much, especially like the afterwards, they'll tell you like, well, we really wanted you to play the female character of these games, and like they hinted at you. They'll 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 make those characters a little more likable. Like, for example, in the terms of Alexios and Cassandra, a lot of people picked a lot of people picked Alexios, but like overall, the consensus was that Cassandra was the person was a better actress and more likable. And even in the storyline, Cassandra is the canon character,
Yeah.
right? But Cassandra doesn't fit in the historical aspect of Assassin's Creed. So they bring a lot of things into the mix, like, oh, like Ubisoft takes pride in like the historical events, mixing story with history, their own story with history, and I think
Hmm.
it's great. But it gets diluted when they they change too much the historical background of it. Because one thing that I do appreciate about these games is that they try to bring the culture to of that generation, the
Yeah.
culture of the game.
Of that era. Yeah.
Yeah, that era. But then it gets diluted completely when you're saying to me that Cassandra was a Spartan. She fought in Spartan wars. She was considered a Spartan. Whenever there is, I always gets me upset. It's like whenever there is a bunch of men in our, like, in politics and in the Assassin's Creed Odyssey games, it's like they see Cassandra speaking out and like making powerful statements, and they're like, "Oh, that's good. That's a very open of you, and I'm glad that you brought this up. I'm gonna listen to you now." I'm like, I don't know if, like, for me, like in that time, like I don't know if every person would have been the same. Like, my understanding is that it's like even in those times, even though like at least in Spartan women had rights and they could divorce and they could get at property and all that stuff, and that's all well and cool. But when you're talking about Greek society, like the Greeks themselves, they they didn't give a lot of rights to women. So when this happening with Cassandra, and she's talking and uh, and bringing about these ideas, and men are listening, I'm like, yeah. So like what I would have liked from Ubisoft was like just commit to the woman, commit to the
Yeah,
female
show that
character.
struggle, show what she has to go through. Don't freaking
Exactly.
build the story around trying to tiptoe between, a male and female character when you can barely tell the story and convince people of what's actually going on.
Exactly. Like I would have loved for Valhalla because they're saying that Eivor, I picked the male version because you're dealing with England at that time. It's the 800s, England. You're dealing with the Catholic Church. Um, yeah, like in that respect, like again, in those times, women's did not have a lot of rights, and here
No.
comes Eivor as a woman, just like I will save you, and like the the Catholic character is like, oh, go for it, like they're very nonchalant. I'm like, I
Oh.
don't know. I don't know that would have been that easy. Like
So
I
before we go any further, what I want to do, and I meant to do this a little bit earlier, but I want to define what wokeness is according to at least to Wikipedia. All right, so woke is an English adjective meaning alert to racial prejudice and discrimination that originated in African American vernacular English (AAVE) beginning in the 2010s. It came to encompass a broader awareness of social inequities such as sexism and has also been used as shorthand for left wing ideas involving identity politics and social justice, such as the notion of white privilege and slavery reparations for African Americans. Now, I want to say that I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and woke never really like that racial prejudice and discrimination thing for me personally growing up. It didn't mean that, but it mean to have a brighter, broader knowledge of things going on, along with like how people actually treat you and view you and things like that. So yeah, the racial prejudice and discrimination was a part of it, but that wasn't the only thing about wokeness. Like when somebody was like, I'm woke, that's not necessarily what they meant. The whole it was a whole concept that encompass a lot more than just racial prejudice and discrimination.
Mhm.
So, like, when I hear the word woke in being used uh, to describe situations in video games, it's odd to me. It's weird to me. In looking at this definition, it starts to make sense when people say like, "Oh, this game is just social justice ideas and it's woke and they're forced diversity and stuff like that." It makes sense to me after reading the definition. But like when I was first hearing, it's like none of this makes any sense because none of this is woke at all.
I think honestly, I think people have lost the definition of woke.
Yeah,
You can call anything woke. So
yeah,
we were talking about this a couple of days, not a couple of days ago, just literally a couple of minutes ago. Um, remember the Avengers scene, the end game part where like
yeah.
all the female characters are together. Like you'd be surprised how many people call that scene just like that scene woke. Was it woke?
I mean, it was, and there's also been that whole negative view painted on feminism and how you know how that hasn't had a negative effect on video games and oh there's more women characters and you can start talking like you think about Horizon Zero Dawn, you think about The Last of Us Part 2, games like that where there's the women protagonists and there's
Exactly.
other women that empower. I mean, I've even seen people
I
complain about there being too many black people in Horizon Zero Dawn, the second one. um
I did. I haven't played it, but yeah,
It
it's
was
almost
just I
the
was
same.
watching a gameplay. I don't have a PS5 yet, so I was watching gameplay of it, and I ran across a review, and dude's like, "Yeah, there's too many black people in here," and I'm like, "What does that even mean?"
Yeah, like I don't understand what that even means.
So
It's like it does get me frustrated that we use like wokeness as an insult, and also I it also gets me frustrated when people don't like a certain thing, they immediately, well, that's woke now. Like and I will give you the prime example. Like So I'm gonna say something controversial for video gamers. I loved The Last of Us Part Two. I absolutely love The Last of Us Part Two,
I don't think you're
and
the only one.
and and it bothered me that I at first I'll be honest, I was in that train. I was in that train when people were complaining about The Last of Us Part Two, and I was, like I was listening to it, and it's like, oh man, they ruined Last of Us Part Two. But I'm like, something inside me was like, you need to still check this out. You can't be manipulated by like what people are just saying. You need to check it out yourself. And then I played it, and my mind was blown. Mind you, like I get the part, and spoilers alert. Like, this is a podcast, I'm gonna spoil it. Like, Joel dies, right? So I
Yeah.
get the part where Joel dies, and people get frustrated because he died really early on, and that in itself is not a matter of wokeness. Like, it's not a matter of wokeness. It's whether Neil Druckmann, the writer, um, whether it was better for him to keep Joel alive all the way up to the end of the video game, or just keep him alive whatsoever. It was a decision that he made because he thought that that would give more purpose to the story that he wanted to tell. And I respect that as a like him as a writer. So I didn't necessarily think that Joel dying was like the best decision, but I respected it, right? And
Yeah.
I appreciated the story because of the way that he turned it. Now, because Ellie was a female character, and you played as Ellie, and then you played as Abby, these two women, like, I love The Last of Us because these two women are not perfect. It's like they very much have their own faults. They have their own unique identities. Like, they have character. They have flaws. Especially Ellie. Like, I was on that bandwagon when, like, I was a fan of Joel. Like, I love the original Last of Us. I played The Last of Us 3 or 4 times. I drove my wife crazy playing The Last of Us. Like, are you gonna continue playing The Last of Us? Because any edition that they brought up, I'll play.
Yeah.
Right? I was a fan of it. So when Joel died, I can understand why the writer did it, because I was on a rampage. I was like, I wanted to kill everybody that was a part of Joel's demise, and it led to that point. But I saw that Ellie was going into a dark corner, and I appreciated that, and I appreciated the fact that it's like you could see Abby's side, and even though at the end of it, I didn't like Abby anymore, like any more than I did when I first met her, but I could understand her. See,
Yeah.
people tend to people tend to just be upset at that situation. Like you, it's it's not a matter of whether or not Neil wanted you to like Abby. It's a matter of whether or not you can understand Abby's plight, and I
Well, I
could
think
definitely understand.
that's the thing that makes a great villain, though, right? Like that's like and yeah, I think what you spend most of. I haven't played the last one again. Like I kind of refuse to keep playing on my PS4, PS5. I don't have one yet, so I haven't played this game either, right? But you play most of that game as Abby, correct?
No, you play most of that game as Ellie. So, like, I would say that it's like 60-40. So
Okay, so
60% as Ellie.
you spend a good amount of time with her, and
The game is long.
it's to humanize her. It's to see where she's coming from. If you stopped at that point where she kills Joel, and you're like, this is not what I was expecting from the game. I don't want to play this game, and you didn't finish the whole thing. Do you really have a platform to stand on when you're saying the game is bad? Right? Like if you didn't put a significant amount of time into the game, can you really say it's bad? You can say you didn't like it. You can say you didn't like the story. You can say you didn't like where it was going. But can you say the game was bad? And I don't think you can. Like,
No, that's a high quality game. That's a very high quality game. Like it, it, some stories are, like they're controversial in the sense of like the where they're heading,
yeah,
but I can never deny that there was bad writing. And another thing, this is again from the people that are calling this game woke. It drives me crazy to listen to like people, oh, like it was the writer's fault. For some reason, Abby was at the right moment at the right time to see Joel right there. That was very like uh, they put Abby in a good position, and like that was bad writing, right? So they say that, but people don't understand like with protagonists, like for some reason the protagonists are always put like gold mines like in front of them in order to progress the story. It's like at this point you don't like Abby, and I get it, so you're like so upset that this happened, but you see that all the time in other video games. For example, I was playing Uncharted Lost Legacy, and I just finished it today, and I was seeing that in every time, like like there's a lot of parkour
Yeah.
in Uncharted, right? So many times the main character falls, but somehow there is like there's a saving grace where the person grabs the ledge or like hooks on into something, and like the main character always survives. I'm like, that is damn luck.
I mean,
It's
that first Tomb Raider game, if you want to go with that first Tomb Raider game is almost like torture porn, right? Like she's getting stabbed, she's getting knocked around, she almost gets raped. I mean, like there is so much going on in that first hour of that
you're
game.
talking about 2013.
Yeah, yeah,
There you go.
the first remake or reboot for the Tomb Raider
Yeah.
series. But I wanna hop back to something that you said. You mentioned Assassin's Creed, right? And
Mhm.
there's this long list of articles that on Reddit that kind of talked about how forced diversity, or AKA wokeness, is by and large a myth, right? And when you go and you talk about Assassin's Creed, I'm going to quote directly from the article. Development of 2018's Assassin's Creed Odyssey went much the same way. The game tells the story of siblings Cassandra and Alexios. The team originally proposed making the sister the only playable character, according to four people who worked on the game. Until they were told that that wasn't an option, the final product gives players a choice between the two characters. All of the directives came from Ubisoft marketing department, or from Haskell. I don't know how you say his name. I think that's French.
But did you see also there's another article that like the director of Assassin's Creed Odyssey comes out and says like, so apparently like 70 to 75% of people that played Assassin's Creed played as Alexios,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
as
So
Cassandra.
this right here says both of whom suggested female protagonists wouldn't sell, right? So they went into these they go into these these testings and the focus groups and everything, and they figure out what sells, who are you bringing into that, and then how is the marketing material for it, right? Like I don't have normal TV anymore. I don't see commercials. I think when this game came out, I was sitting in Hawaii somewhere, so I wasn't watching. I didn't see any advertisement for this game, but like
It was all focused on Alexios too.
is all the advertisements and everything were focused on Alexio. So if that's the case, then that's who people are going to play.
and
And
and and,
go ahead.
and it's funny because Valhalla did the same thing. They wanted to make Eivor as the main character, a female character, right?
Hmm.
So like what they did was something I think it was relatively cheap. But so they did like you can choose either female or male, and then or can have the option at certain points in the storyline. It's like it will switch either male female depending on the story beats which fits the character best. So like basically what it meant that in Assassin's Creed Valhalla you essentially had two characters. So you had Eivor and you had Odin,
Hmm.
and if you allowed that to like if you pick the side of which one is the one that fits the best, Eivor is the female character that lives in the 800s, and then when you go into the past when you're talking about Odin's story, it was changed into the male character.
Uh,
And I I found it cheap because at all these commercials, the very first commercial, I remember the first trailer for Assassin's Creed Valhalla was a male protagonist.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, it
like
was.
and it looked like Ragnar Lopro or whatever in that show about Valhalla or Vikings.
Mhm.
Or actually Ragnar in the Last Kingdom too. He looked just like him. I'm like, all right, that's really cool. But then they're putting on, oh, it might be an actual female. It's like I want to play. Honestly, I want to play the canon character. Like if that's the
It,
case, but
what I want to do is have them be able to freely make the game they want to play or make the game they want to make, and
yeah,
I basically play it if I want to or not. Right, like this idea of, and they did it with Far Cry 6. You can either be male or female, which is fine, but that's fine in a game like say Elden Ring or Fallout, where they're not trying. The story isn't
mm-hmm,
very focused on the character
mm-hmm.
themselves. Like if you're looking at say like might use Fallout 4 for an example. Like yeah, it's a very generalized thing. You're looking for your son, and like it doesn't matter if you're male or female in that game. But something like uh Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, even where again, depending on the type of society that they're living in, women, anybody that's LGBTQ, in any their rights are going to be diminished. Then if you're going to make a character, you have to focus on that character so that story can be told properly. And
Exactly.
and
I wholeheartedly agree.
the biggest thing here though, is that you're not really seeing those, like the character might be a woman, right? But are they really diving into any of the issues that a woman might face? And I don't think so. Like
No,
even
no, I completely agree. They don't. They just don't.
in
Eh,
Horizon Forbidden West, Horizon Zero Dawn, a lot of women have uh positions of power, and that resembles a lot of tribes and stuff, of the past, that resembles tribes in Africa where there are matriarchies instead of patriarchy. And so is that woke, or is that just telling a story from a different perspective? And if you don't want to see that story from a different perspective, then why are you being so loud about it?
mm. Yeah, and when it comes to Horizon, that I I personally don't like the game. I played the first one. I finished it. I didn't like the game because I found the main character boring. I found Aloy boring, but I didn't have any issues with the society that they lived in. For me, it very much made sense. It was a different turn of like the matriarch taking the lead and all that stuff. Um, I that's where I have to be uh, open minded in the sense that this has never happened. This is a completely new story. This is fantasy,
Hmm.
and because it is fantasy. This is something that I appreciate. Okay, so like they can tell a story revolving on a new society that came out after this catastrophic event happened. My again, going back to the Assassin's Creed games, my issue is like when you're trying to change history for the sake of just trying to appease everybody. It's like that for me doesn't work. Like Last of Us Part Two works because it's in a dystopian society. Like it's something that has never happened, and it's like we're talking about future events
Hmm.
that like yeah, it could definitely happen in like these things. Given how our society is going right now, it can definitely happen now, in the future. But
So there is a game, like, so not all, and again, not all publishers need to see this. Not all developers or game publishers need to do things the same way. There's a game, indie game called Mordhau. It's a first person medieval combat type game. It's a lot like Chivalry, but Chivalry 2 took a long time to come out, so these guys made Mordhau. Um, that community is completely racist and toxic to anybody that isn't a white male. Um,
what community is this again?
this is
What
this
what
is
video
this
game?
is Mordhau. This is a game called,
Morehouse.
yeah, Mordhau. And when people brought this up to developers, they're like, "Hey, that's what it is. We're not changing that. That's the gamer's right to do that." I wholeheartedly respect that, and I was going to buy their game, and I decided not to because they
What
weren't
is
going to.
a whole? What is a whole horror about? What
It's
are?
it's a it's a multiplayer. It's like first person melee combat. Like you can play as like say with different types of swords, bow and arrow, stuff like that. It's first person combat, but set in medieval Europe type place,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's multiplayer. Um, if you look up gameplay, it looks really fun. But again,
And why is it like why is it controversial to you?
why is it isn't well? It's interesting that the developers were like, "Yo, we don't care about how our community acts," right? So the
Oh, okay. So
yeah
the community in
the
it
community
is.
itself is just toxic, or at least it was when I heard about the after the game officially released. I saw a couple of a couple of people talk about it, saw some gameplay footage of it. I'm like, oh, okay, I was gonna buy this, but I'm not gonna buy this now, right? And that's my right? Like you have every right to say whatever you want to on a thing. I have a right not to engage in that. But it's very interesting that they use that game, with the false narrative of, this is a whites only space, that
Oh.
they went to that and they kind of claimed it. Fine, you can
Mm.
have it, right? But don't act like any of these other games that come out, like the majority of all games come out, don't kind of cater to that mainstream group.
Mm.
So like
Okay.
like when you look at it, and this is kind of the test, I not the test, but this is kind of the way I look at it. How many AAA games have been released that have a black female lead?
Nah, honestly, none.
One's been
No,
announced.
no, no,
One's been
no.
announced recently, and that's
There's been
Forspoken.
there's been one. I remember there's one Xbox game that I saw. Like there have been a few, but not many.
Yeah,
It
so like
hasn't.
when there are hundreds of games released a day
Yeah,
on
there's gonna be
Steam,
one.
but like when you talk, yeah, like there's gonna be some out there, right? But but I narrowed it down like that because those are the ones that get the largest, they make the largest amount of money, the largest group of people see them. So the question is okay, they're worried about money, they're worried about sales. Okay, so they don't put a female lead. They do. Game publishers do put a female lead up on there, but when's the last time you saw a black female lead?
And the thing is, brother, like I think that if you were just like when it comes to these characters, if they were just like instead of trying to prove something, just make a character that's believable. I think that's the key. I think people would flock to those games that are characters that are actually believable, that have faults. You mentioned so. Speaking of that, so like you mentioned that which when was the last time? So Uncharted Lost Legacy.
Hmm.
So the main protagonists, both Chloe Frazier and Nadine Ross. So Chloe Frazier is an Indian Australian character,
Hmm.
and uh, and Nadine Ross is black. Um, those two, like the combination of those two, the voice actresses, and uh the story itself, right? Like that story between them, like fantastic, very likable people, and none of it had to do anything with identity politics or anything like that. It was just like a very good story of
Yeah,
two women just kicking ass and just like freaking being like Indiana Jones types people. In fact, I'll go further. I liked Lost Legacy way more than Uncharted 4. It's like
oh,
I really liked it. I actually like Chloe Frazier more than I do Nathan Drake. And the reason that I like Chloe Frazier more is because Chloe is honest about who she is. She's a
yeah,
thief. and she's she likes what she does. She doesn't have like a moral high ground. So Nathan, uh, like
Oh,
we
Nathan's
talk,
a mass murderer,
hey, right,
man.
we talked about this. We talked about this. Like I get it. Nathan puts himself in positions where like he has no choice but to fight, right? Um, but there's something innocent about him that just doesn't fit with the rest of the gameplay. So like Nathan, like I think that Nathan is not a mass murderer per se. I just think that the story doesn't, or the gameplay doesn't fit his character, because Nathan by himself, he's a well-natured person.
Yeah.
So like I can, I like him, but then if they put this gameplay in front of you and like do like freaking just murder all these people, and I'm like, I don't know, man. So with Chloe, I felt like, yeah, it makes more sense because Chloe is more like, I know that I'm a thief. I know I'm not a good person, and but in the storyline itself, I thought it was great. In the storyline itself, it's like, I'm not a good person, but now that I am experiencing my culture, and I'm seeing like I have a personal relationship with this story, because like her deal was like, there is this item that her father wanted to find, that was very important to their culture,
Hmm.
and he was never, like, supposedly he was never able to find it. So she goes out to find it, but she does it not because of her culture. She tries to find it because she wants to sell it and make money out of it, right? So that's her take on it, and it was beautifully done, because as she continues going through the ruins and learning more about the history behind the item, she starts realizing how important it is to her too. And at the end of it, she decides that she's not going to sell it to the highest bidder. She's going to give it to the Ministry of Culture, so they can deal with it. So they can put it as like as an item that's important to their culture. And I completely respected that story. I loved it. It was so well done. Nothing that had to do like in your face, like, you know,
It wasn't preaching to you. It just presented these people as people, right? Like,
yeah.
I am doing this thing and this is who I am, and that might drive some of the decisions I make, but this is a story that we're telling from my perspective, or this is what's going on. I get that. And I think one of the bigger points, right? Like when things do feel like, you kind of mentioned that one scene from Endgame, right? Where all the female heroes join up, is you really have to have whatever demographic you're trying to add into your story. You have to have like those same type of people on the writers team, right? Like that way you don't come off as tone deaf or seeming forced. It's not forced if, you're forcing a male to write for a female, if you're forcing a male to write for a woman, right? Like it's not forced if a woman's actually doing it.
Hmm.
Like it comes off better. You can work it, like integrate that into your team. And that's where, the diversity thing could lead to a better game.
Let me ask you something. Um, and this is something controversial that did come out of Lost Legacy. So in Lost Legacy, one of the things that they, like, a lot of people, not a lot of people, that again, the vocal minority, complain about, is that the main characters aren't actually of those descents. So like Chloe Fraser, I don't know, I think she's the same one that played Morgan in Dragon Age, and then we have Laura Bailey, who played as the black character in Nadine Ross. She has an Australian Nadine Ross has an Australian accent,
Hmm.
and I think the voice actress itself did a fantastic job, but she wasn't black, and Chloe Fraser wasn't Indian Australian either. It's like, what do you feel about
So
that? I personally didn't mind, because like they I thought that actresses did their voice beautifully. They weren't trying, for me, like they weren't trying to act out in a
Yeah, they weren't
specific
trying to
culture.
like they weren't trying to imitate something that they weren't. They just kind of voice acted, and it just fit into those characters. So, I don't believe that typically I don't get upset at things like that, like like I think the voice actor for like say Cleveland on Family Guy stepped down because he was voicing a black guy, and he wanted, and I think like that right there, you've been doing that for X number of years, it really doesn't matter, right?
And
But
then Boo or something like that, and Simpsons also stepped down.
I don't know.
I know that a couple of people like in both Simpsons and the Family Guy they stepped down.
Yeah, they stepped down. So like but like those are established characters, man. They've been doing that thing. But like when you have someone like oh man, I can't remember his name right now. The guy that replaced Peter Dinklage as the ghost in Destiny 2. Oh
Oh,
man.
that's Nathan Drake. You're talking
Yeah.
about uh Nolan North or something
Yeah,
like
Nolan
that.
North. There we go. Man, drawing all kind of blanks. But
Uh,
if Nolan North gets a lot of work, right? He's always going to get a lot of work until he loses his voice, right? So, but if there's a new character that comes along and that character is some POC that some ethnicity that Nolan North isn't, it would be
hey,
fucked up to give it to Nolan North because he already gets a ton of work, right? Like Nolan North gets a ton of work. He's not hurting for anything.
you think like Nolan North is like if you're talking about voice actors, I think that
He's
the one that gets overused, but I love is Troy Baker.
yeah,
Troy
yeah.
Baker is Bioshock Infinite, The Last of Us, the Dying Light, or the first one. He comes like he made Batman in
Yeah.
the Batman Telltale
The
say
Arkham. Oh, Telltale
the
was he? Did he not do the voice in
it,
Arkham?
he did the voice in Arkham too. I think he played the Joker in Arkham Origins. I'm not sure if he did any voices in
But you get what I'm
Arkham
saying.
City.
But you see, like
Yeah,
you're kind of proving my point right there, right? Like Troy Baker gets a lot of work, and
yeah,
so
Troy Baker,
like
but he's really good too. Like that's the thing though.
yeah. But see,
like
like
it
you would never know if someone else is good if they don't get that shot, right? If and the same can be said for Phil Lamar, right? Phil Lamar gets a shit ton of work, and he gets a ton of work for different characters, right? Like he does Samurai Jack, he did Vamp,
Bam, yeah.
and those guys are not black at all, but Phil Lamar did a great job, right?
I
And
remember
so
listening about Phil Lamar. Phil Lamar did, I believe, Knights of the Old Republic. He voiced one of the Jedi, one of
yeah,
the old Jedi. I thought that was like I remember that he did such a good job. That old Jedi is also like he's also one of the partners in the Knights of the Old Republic. But that's the
hmm
first time that I heard about him, and I continue to hear about him. This guy is famous. I mean,
yeah.
yeah,
But
he's been
I
around.
just I just want to point out like it doesn't matter as long as everybody's getting that shot, right? Like everybody's being able to get that shot and get those roles, and this like I take my victories where I can, and I don't get upset about everything. So like, okay, like cool. Um, this one person, in that game, they're voiced by voice actresses and stuff like that. Okay, cool, whatever. Like honestly, I didn't even play it. I I forgot that game existed.
Which one is this again?
The Uncharted Lost Legacy.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Like
I completely forgot that game existed.
it's honestly one of the I'm not a fan of the Uncharted series. I play them. I play them because every time they come out, they always get so much hype, and I always fall into that hype train.
Uh huh.
And every time that I play them, it's always the same thing. And like one thing that I hate about on the Uncharted series and a lot of other games. So in order to intensify the difficulty, um, they just they throw at you so many people that it's unrealistic. So again, like Uncharted is
That's
not
that's
based
why I
on
said
realism.
that's why I said
It's
Nathan Drake is a
it,
mass
yeah,
murderer.
yeah.
Because they
It's
do that to like pad out the game time, but it doesn't make sense in context of the story.
exactly. So like in Uncharted 4, I know that we're going on a tangent on here, but in Uncharted 4, I was playing it, and at the very end, it's a very moving story. But we're in an island. I've already killed a lot of people. Where are these guys coming from?
How deep are your pockets, and how did you convince all these people to come at me and die?
Like you're like listen like we've wore gear before, like it's heavy stuff, right? Like and they're just passing mountains, just fine. Like so so what they do is they also have like these armored soldiers. It's like we like you and me wore helmets, and we've seen it. Like helmets protect, but not that much. It's
No.
like you have to shoot their helmets off and then shoot their faces. Like it got to a point where like I don't think they're helmets that are that tough. You know,
Yeah.
it got to the point that it's so unrealistic that it loses the fun in it, and like it loses and like those. I don't understand why the directors on any video game would think that by putting more people, it will make the story even more exciting. Like follow the story through, understand the pacing of it. It does not require it. And in fact, if you're putting a lot of more people in it, it means that you're losing creativity because you don't know how else to complicate the situation without putting more villains in the picture.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So
so
wrapping up,
going back to
so let's kind of take this home, right? In short, do you think, given the definition of wokeness, right, or how we kind of define what woke is, do you think video games are woke? Do you think they're pushing a woke agenda?
so I read the article that you sent me, and we talked about it a little bit at the beginning, and it mentioned that in actuality, people are like marketers are saying like it is like we they're actually pushing to promote more men into video games because men apparently in their view they sell. And in that respect, in that respect, you're saying that no, it's not promoting a woke agenda, uh, but I would also argue that like those people that are complaining about the video game industry are changing the storyline of people that actually want to tell a good story.
Hmm.
So I told you before, I think the Assassin's Creed games would have been so much better. The Far Cry 6 game would have been so much better if they would have just focused on the female, but also talk about like the true, very true issues that women have to go through, or did go through in those cultures. Like as an Hispanic, I could tell you,
Yeah.
brother, like Far Cry 6, it's like it was definitely trying to mimic Cuba. I mean, like there's no denying it. It's just trying to mimic Cuba, right?
Hmm.
And in it, like the guy might have been a dictator, but he was very much like very open to different like women and men being equal. I'm like, wow, that's very progressive dictator that we have here. And it's like, and normally you would not have that. Like, it's let's just be real. Like in a Hispanic culture, you would not have that, and women every day still struggle to have their voices here. So when heard. So when you put it, when you put a Far Cry game like this, and you show it like that, like oh, like it's a woman, no worries. Like it's like any other person in this world. I'm like, that doesn't actually work like that, and you're actually not giving justice to women's suffrage in that culture, especially if you're going to focus so much on it. Because the honest truth is, they could say it's a fantasy, but that looked like Hispanic culture to me. You know,
So, um, my take is that no, it isn't right now. but I think the majority of it isn't. But I think it's going to move into telling those different stories because there are those writing teams, those development teams, they want to tell these different stories. Um, because they've been telling the same stories for so long. Like even when you look at the type of games that get made, um, I think one year what we had God of War, we had the Ubisoft Greek game. There's like they always focus on like this small subset of the entire world's culture, right? And it kind of gets dry after a while. That's kind of why I didn't play Odyssey. Um, I didn't play Valhalla only because that's the kind of stuff that's constantly put out. You have TV shows about Vikings, you have movies about the Vikings. This video game comes out, and I'm kind of Vikinged out. I'm kind of Greeked out. I don't want to play. I don't want to play something else talking about Greek gods and you know Spartans and stuff like that because so much of it's been put out. So
If you haven't played God of War though, you
yeah,
should.
I have. That
Thank
was
God.
that's
All
the
right.
last game I've played. Like God of War is the last one I played that was uh Norse. Like, well, out of the two, out of the I decided to go ahead and play God of War, and that game is great, and absolutely love it. And Judge, what's his name? The voice
You're
actor.
uh, I know. I'm gonna
You
Google
gotta
this
Google
really
it.
fast. Yeah, God of War actor.
Christopher Judge.
Yeah, Christopher Judge. He
There we
did
go.
a fantastic job as.
Again, black dude playing what you can assume is a white guy. I'm not sure what ethnicity Kratos is.
Because his body is just full of. He's Greek though. Like
He's Greek. He's
yeah.
Greek. Yeah. So, but again, black actor playing a Greek character. So, again, it's let the stories be told that those people want to tell, and you'll get a better game out of it.
You
You
know
know.
that Miles Morales is like the voice actor of Miles Morales. Like so there's a lot of Hispanic reference and you hear the mom who's Hispanic, Puerto Rican.
Uh huh.
She speaks to Miles Morales, right? And you notice right away that Miles Morales, the voice actor, actually doesn't know a lick of Spanish. But he like he does not like you can tell he does not know a lick of Spanish. But like say this in Spanish, gracias, mama, all that stuff. I'm like,
So I have a
okay.
question for you then. I have a question for you then. Um,
Mhm.
does that bother you? Because like I know there are like in our area there are a lot of Mexican families and stuff here, and some of the children don't speak Spanish, right? And so like I know that's a real world thing, but they have Mal. I'm guessing they have Miles speak Spanish in the game.
Yeah, so
So
exactly. So like that's the only thing. Like yeah, like it's completely understandable if second generation people don't know how to speak Spanish. I have no problem with it. I do think I was thinking about it though. Like when it comes to Miles Morales, there are really like at least in Miles Morales, they're really pushing not only that he was a black ethnicity, that he's also Puerto Rican and because they were really pushing for it whenever he spoke Spanish, I'm like, yeah, you definitely know. And I know that it was a black actor that voiced Miles Morales,
mhm.
and I had no problem. I had no problem with it. I honestly like I have to be fair because at the same time like I don't I'm at that ballpark that I don't
Yeah, I
mind
know.
whoever is voicing him. Now, I would have I think personally for me I think I would have been offended if Miles Morales was voiced by a white actor. Just because I mean if and here's the difference. Here's the difference, and I'm glad that we brought this up. Here's the difference because a lot, you know how like these social justice warriors are. There's a difference. So when it comes to Chloe Frazier and Nadine Ross, um, I I think like it wasn't so much hit on the nose as Miles Morales. Miles Morales one part of his story was that he is half black, half Puerto Rican.
Mhm.
And because he is half black, half Puerto Rican, it would have been like I for me it would have been like, oh, I like all of a sudden a white actor playing Miles Morales. For me, it would have been like, wow, that's actually pretty disrespectful. There's and also there's a scene. There is a scene also in Miles Morales that very powerful. So I spoke to you a little bit. So after you finish all the side quests in Miles Morales, which by the way I'm going to tell you right now, I think Miles Morales was a way better story than the original Spider-Man,
Okay.
the Spider-Man 2 2018. There's a scene in Miles Morales where once you finish it, it's like the people of Harlem get together and they do this beautiful mural of Spider-Man and also says Black Lives Matter in it. And I thought that was, yeah, that was, like I know that a lot of people like it's Black Lives Matter shouldn't be a controversial topic, but unfortunately it is, right?
Mhm.
And I remember seeing that. I was like, wow, that's pretty deep and that's pretty brave of the people that did it, because it's a mainstream game and you are sending a political message. I honestly, by definition, then that
That one,
Spider-Man Miles Morales is actually a woke game,
Miles,
but
yeah,
by
and
definition.
I definitely give you that. And when you brought it up before, I was like, that definitely fits that definition. But then I want to jump back to how many games have released from 2018 to 2022 that are woke?
Not many,
Triple
man.
A.
Not many. I haven't played that many. And it and like I haven't played that many that are like are woke. I I think that
I feel if you want to find those games, you definitely have to go into the indie space. There are definitely a few games that I have in my gigantic Steam backlog that are
but
definitely woke, right?
but we're arguing, so we're arguing about the definition. So like by definition there aren't a lot of woke games, but the
No,
people in so like in the social media space, um the people that we know of, right? Like they would consider, if like I remember I have a friend, we were watching like I was so excited for the Obi-Wan trailer, right?
uh-huh.
And I sent it to him. It's like, oh my god, this is so epic. And he goes on and tells me like, I'm not sure, man. I see a lot of women there. I see a black character there. I'm like, what?
Wow.
What?
Okay.
And another thing, last one is like, I have to shout out to Miles Morales. Like, honestly, like, no, seriously, like that game you talking about, like hitting straight to him. Like, I think Miles Morales, it's like more than Black Panther. It's because so like I get your point, and I think you make a really valid point. Completely true, completely 100% agree with you. For me, however, seeing a person that appreciates Hispanic culture in the video game. So like, yeah, I hope one day, Kris, you can play the video game, man. It's such a beautiful
It's
game.
on my list. It's
Yeah,
Spider
like,
Man's Miles Morales,
so you
Ghost
go
of
to the
Tsushima,
yeah,
and
so you go to the apartment. So you go to the apartment, and like in the apartment that he lives with his mom, like you see trinkets that like I can immediately say like, oh man, I recognize that immediately because I see it all the time at home. Like I see it all the time at home.
and
It
that's the
is,
importance of having someone on your staff that understands what everybody would see, like what it's like to grow up in a Hispanic home, a Puerto Rican home, right?
yeah.
Like to have someone like, do you think like, and again, I try to bring this up about Atlanta, but like when the first shot opens up and you hear OJ the Juice Man, you hear that song, so
Uh-huh.
like that black people are on the writing team, right? Because if white people are on the writing team, you would have heard Outcast.
But you're talking about Black Panther, right?
No, no, I'm talking
Or
about Atlanta. The
Atlanta.
yeah,
I haven't seen Atlanta.
yeah, but like that like there are black people on this show because of the choice of music that is very what people were listening to in Atlanta at the time, rather
Uh,
than something that like, oh well, I know this group is from Atlanta and this is rap and black people listen to rap, so we're gonna pick this song here. You get what I'm saying?
yeah.
So like
I
there's this real big importance on having like a diverse group be on that team. I'm not saying the group needs to be all black or anything. I know they're one of this. Oh man, I forget his name, but he's a music composer, and he's responsible for hits on like Black Panther, uh, like like almost every mainstream hit for like the last like 4 years. This white dude's been on, and his music is amazing, right? But he has to draw that cultural influence from somewhere else, and he has to kind of be directed and stuff like that too. But I'm just saying, this dude's music is amazing,
yeah.
but like there's also influences and people to kind of guide that. There's like hey, this is what's going on, this is what we need, and he kind of goes from there. So like yeah, it's I think
Dude,
that the industries are going to tell better stories, just like that Michelle Yeoh movie everywhere. That the new Michelle Yeoh movie that just came out, where like 10 years ago that movie would have never been made
which one
because
is Michelle?
uh it just came out.
Malaysian actress? Oh, you're
Yeah,
talking about I know that yes. She
uh
came like something
everything
about
everything
yeah.
everywhere all at once, and
Yeah.
this movie would have never been made 10 years ago because she's in her 50s, her 60s. She's an older woman, older Asian woman, that's a main character of a movie that's getting just rave reviews.
Yeah,
This would have
see like
never happened 10 years ago.
I know IGN is infamous or famous for their reviews, but they gave him a 10 out of 10. And
You
uh,
gotta be careful with that IGN shit.
I,
That might be the
I,
most controversial thing you stated all
I,
day.
I know people get so upset at IGN reviews. I like that's why you check other reviews too. You check IGN. So I go to so I go check IGN, GameSpot, ACG, Easy Allies. I listen to Game Ranks before you buy. Before I even before making a good decision on purchasing a game, I listen to all those people.
But yeah,
Yeah,
man, to wrap up, in short, I don't think it's woke yet. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be when um
but we have
publishers and developers, when the corporate heads feel like they can make money off of it, that's when video games will be woke. But right now
yeah.
it's not.
No, I don't think it will ever be to that point. But I also think that we need to. I think like that this wokeness thing. It's for me, it's tiring because it is like everything that isn't it isn't agreeable to the people that are used to the mainstream. Like like for example, like the analogy that I was making about Star Wars, that there was not a single like apart from Princess Leia and Lando, um, he was completely white characters, white male characters.
Yeah.
Um, in that respect, it's funny because I completely forgot what I was going for. Yes, that in that respect, I think that we're not gonna be seeing that much change, but I do think that we need to start changing the definition of wokeness
Yeah.
because
I
it is
mean,
annoying.
I think
It is.
that gets into a whole other thing, only because there are a few words that I think there like we use different words to mean the same thing, and so when I say a certain word, you hear a completely different meaning than what I'm trying to convey, right?
Yeah, I'm
And
glad that we
so
defined it. I'm
yeah,
glad that.
like I feel like when we go into these kind of conversations and stuff like that, we got to agree on a definition on what that is, because then none of it means anything going forward, because then we're just kind of talking in circles.
Yeah, and honestly, okay, so we need to start wrapping up. But man, like this was our first time, and it's we can actually talk a lot about different things, and it's really exciting to see like where we can take this show. Like I'm really excited to see what you can do with this. So for those of you listening, like I'm just a tagger here. Like I'm just tagging along. But honestly, this is Chris's show, and like this, we can that he can do a lot of good things with this. I'm excited to see the future on the show. And like, imagine like Kris, like this is your first segment, like hopefully eventually you can start bringing like other people of the gaming industry and talk to them about like the different things that they have. These other video game reviewers too, right? Like the ones that we mentioned. Chris Baldino, he's the guy from Game Ranks. I
Yeah.
listen to his
Yeah.
podcast all the time on YouTube. Um, like bring like eventually that's where we want to go, right? Bring him in so we can talk to him and see his own take on it. It's like it's a conversation of different opinions and like or like-minded opinions. It's gonna be fun. I have good.
Yeah,
I
man.
have hopes. But
I think this is a good start. I think this is a good start, and it's a little bit easier than what I was trying to do. That's just the laziness in me talking. But we do need to end this. So, if you guys enjoyed, please subscribe, like, leave a comment, tell me your opinions, tell us your opinions, let us know if you agree or not. That dislike button is also there. I don't think y'all can see it anymore, but I probably should be able to see it in the back end, and I'll post it up. If you don't like it, click the dislike button. There's no shame in that. Anyway, I'll catch you next time. Later.